Welcome to the Somalabl podcast, where everyday people share their hacks for mindful and balanced living. My name is Wanja Karaoke, and I'm so glad you're here. And now, today's show. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice. The views expressed are solely those of the host and the guest featured. For any medical or nutritional advice, please contact your personal doctor or a medical professional. Good to see you, girl. How are you doing? How have you been feeling? What's going on?
It's good to see you. I miss your craziness in the gym. I will be back in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks?
I'll be back, yeah.
Okay. So tell me, how has that been like not being able to come back to the gym for 2 weeks? Because I'm going to get to the beginning story, but I want to start in the middle, go to the back, maybe come to the front. Just figure it all out somehow.
It's interesting because if you'd asked me that question in maybe 2017, 2018, I would have been telling you how I'm dying and I need to be in the gym, and I would have been obsessing about, have I gained a kilo? Have I lost muscle? All these things. But I think that with time, I've realized that there's nothing wrong with not going to the gym. So I'm actually okay. I've enjoyed myself. I've enjoyed the break. Mentally, it's allowed me to also kind of figure out, okay, I'm going back to the gym. I have about 10 months of serious training. What is it? What do I want to do? What's my end game? Yeah, instead of just coming back and not knowing. So it's been good.
So what was 2017 like? Why was that an obsessive time for you?
2017 was the beginning of my sobriety. And so you're coming from a place of being consistently obsessive about a substance to learning to not be obsessive about anything. You know, you're trying to go from where I need alcohol to function to where you're being told, be careful about what you obsess about because you could cross addict. And we just have naturally this obsessive personality. And when I say we, I say addicts and alcoholics. That's just how we are. So at that time, even with gym, I had to be careful not to cross addict because I have cross addicted to the gym before. And I ended up pulling both my hamstrings and being on bed rest, and then went back to drinking. So that's why 2017 for me, mentally, I was still kind of figuring out, what's good for me, what isn't good for me. And even things that are good for you, you can get addicted to them and then they become bad for you. So finding that balance was really delicate at that time.
So you said functioning was impossible or not ideal or possible without alcohol. What was functioning look like? What was it? Tell me a day in the life of Aida before the transition to sobriety began.
So I will say I wasn't physically dependent to the point of where I wake up and I'm shaking and I need to have alcohol. But it had gotten to a point of where if I wanted to have a conversation with you, I would need to have alcohol. If I wanted to socialize, I would need to have alcohol. Because I didn't know how to do any of that without it. So I can't even tell you what a day in the life of Aida was before sobriety. I barely remember those days. But what I can tell you is they were filled with tons of bottles of drinking, tons of unnecessary drama, and then tons of regret and shame afterwards. And I think the thing that people don't realize, or maybe they do, but they ignore it, but alcohol is a depressant. So if you're already in a bad place and you're drinking a little or even excessively, then you're consistently in that bad place. You might be happy while you're drinking, but then once you come off that high, then the depression, and I don't want to say depression because clinical depression is really serious, but that low feeling kicks in and now you're like, why did I do what I did? And then you go back to have a drink to make yourself feel better, and it's just a really vicious cycle. So yeah.
I know, you know my story with having family who struggled with alcohol. It's a personal thing. I know what I see in terms of the regret of behavior. But what was one of the hardest things that would make you feel shameful that you would see yourself doing when you were in that state versus you wouldn't do if you were not in that state?
It's hard to pinpoint one, but I would say it's the really bad decisions I made, which I normally would not have made. I think the one thing that I consistently did throughout my drinking was driving drunk. And I regret immensely because a lot of people have lost their lives from drunk drivers. And of course, the drunk person always somehow survives.
Yeah, why is that?
No clue. I have no clue.
Yeah.
But the people who die are the ones who are either the passenger or an innocent bystander or, you know, the other person that you got into the accident with. And so personally, for me, I would say driving drunk was one of the decisions I made consistently that I regret immensely.
Did you ever have like a scary moment, a near death almost situation? Or was it always just that sense of this could have gone really badly and it didn't?
I wouldn't say near-death situations. Of course, anytime you get behind a wheel and you're drinking, it's possible that it could be a near-death situation. But I think the time that scared me the most was when I got into an accident by myself and I slammed my car into like the center median and I completely detached my front axle from the car. And it was such a bad accident. My car was immediately totaled, but I was still trying to drive.
Wow.
Because that's how drunk I actually was.
Yeah.
And in that state of drunkenness, I was still trying to call a tow truck quickly so I could, you know, go before the cops arrived and all those things. That's just a series of bad decisions, which was leading to the inevitable that I was going to get arrested. But I have heard of people dying in accidents. It's unfortunate. A lady I met while she was visiting Kenya and she went back to the US and she was struggling, you know, with her sobriety and she died waiting for a bus at the bus stop. She got hit by a car and the guy lost control because of snow and ice on the road. But just like that, she died.
Yeah.
And he could have been a drunk driver, but he wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I think anytime we play with not just our lives, but anybody else's lives. You know, already getting behind the wheel when you're sober is dangerous. Now imagine getting behind the wheel when you're drunk.
Yeah.
So I regret it immensely. I really do.
So when did it all change? When did because it sounds like it was, how long was this going on for, by the way? How many years would you say this?
How many years have I drunk? Did I drink for?
Yeah, like when it was like too much drinking or like out of control drinking.
Whoa.
And also what's too much? Because you know too much means different things to different people.
This is true. Too much means it's different for different people. But the rule of thumb is if every time you drink and something bad happens, there's a problem. Let me just say it that way to be polite.
Are you Kenyan? Because I don't know if we translate this as too much. I feel like we're in
a major problem.
Yeah.
I cannot recall when I have drank and things didn't go bad. So I would say that probably for the entirety of my drinking career, which was upwards of 23 years, something always went bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And too much, I don't know, like, are you that person who you're with your friends and they can have a few drinks and say, hey, I'm going home, and you're the one looking for another bar or buying a bottle to go home to or drinking the whole night or waking up in the morning and saying, oh, I need to have a drink before I go to work. Then in that case, you're getting to the too much drinking. But it's relative to who you are.
Yeah. And did it throw other things off balance, relationships, work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say I've lost, whether being fired or quit, many jobs for no reason. Sometimes just because either I was worried that I was going to get in trouble because I got drunk at an event or something like that.
Yikes.
I've been fired for getting drunk and cussing out a client.
Girl, you did it all, huh?
Yeah, there's many more things. But yeah, it did. You know, even my marriage to my ex, even though later on we both were like, okay, both of us should not have been drinking. But I think the toll of our marriage was because of our drinking.
Yeah.
The relationship with my daughter, you know, hadn't been away for her for 8 years, I think is the biggest relationship that has suffered because of my drinking.
Yeah. And so when did the turnaround come and how did that happen? So what
What started to change that? I mean, 23 years of this habit is quite a long time.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's ingrained, and also one of the physiological things that happens with alcohol in terms of the rewiring of the brain. So what started to change? What started the 2017 journey, or did it start before 2017, and how did that happen?
I would say it probably started unknowingly before 2017. I would say it probably started in around 2014 when I was assaulted by my neighbor. And I think that event led to more serious consequences in regards to like the decisions I was making. The consequences that were happening were getting worse and worse, which ended up leading me to coming back to Kenya. So as much as Kenya is a big drinking society, I got sober because I came back to Kenya.
Interesting.
I know it's an oxymoron, but literally that is the big change that happened.
Why? Was it an access issue? Was it a support? So obviously you were in the States this whole time that this was going on.
Yeah.
So what was different between those two environments?
Visibility.
In front of who?
My family. Because in the US, they were hearing stories about my drinking and what was going on. And in fact, they didn't even know about the assault until much later on. So I think being in Kenya and the visibility, and ultimately what led to me being like, okay, either I do this or I die, was visibly seeing the disappointment in my family's face when I went to rehab first and then I relapsed. And it was almost like this defeat, like we're done. Like we don't know what to do with you. And let me tell you, Georgina, it's like the scariest feeling to feel like nobody is going to be there for you regardless of what happens. That was, for me, the turning point. Yeah.
So they mattered enough for you to sort of take their, I don't want to say threat, but the possibility that they would leave you out by yourself.
Ultimately, there was never a verbal, we're going to disown you. But I could see it, and maybe not even physically in their face, but I could see the defeat emotionally. Like, I feel like they were spent, like they were just like, we're done. And if I had continued to drink, one, I probably would have died. But two, I don't think that they would have disowned me, but I wasn't willing to take that chance. Yeah.
Why? What's so scary about not having anyone, especially your family?
You know, ultimately, even though family can be a pain.
Yeah, don't we know that? Sorry.
Ultimately, you know, we are humans. We long for a connection with someone. It doesn't matter who it is, whether it's family or a friend or a spouse. So actually, the thinking about the possibility of not having anyone, that for me was a scary thought. I'm a social being, even though my social, meter does get worn out very quickly. I know. But I love my family.
Yeah.
I love my family. Ultimately, I love my family. But ultimately, I would never want to be alone.
Yeah.
And I think that stems a lot from low self-esteem during, the 23 years of drinking, and probably even before that. Now, if you asked me if I could be alone, I would be like, yeah, like what the heck? I love being by myself. But at that time, it was a scary thought.
Yeah. Okay. Can you was there a moment or a process? So, you said that, when the possibility that they were just frustrated and they would leave you alone.
Yeah.
What step did you take, and how did you even know what step to take towards the other direction?
Oh, I didn't know. I just went back to rehab.
Okay.
I went to rehab. I confided in one of the counselors who's now become a really good friend of mine. And I was just, everybody's always like, oh, did you have this bright light moment? I didn't have a bright light moment. It happened so subtly. But when I went back to rehab, I was supposed to go for 2 weeks. And my 2 weeks was up and I was like, I'm not leaving. I'm not ready. I need 2 more weeks. And in the last 2 weeks of being back in rehab, I had to make some really tough decisions, like boundaries with my family, and then also cutting off a lot of people in my life
So take me back to the boundaries thing. What does that mean?
So, you know how we are all really bad at saying no to family? That can be a trigger for me.
Okay.
Because it's always been this thing of call Aida when you need something. Like, she's always gonna be there.
Okay.
But that for me, it feeds two things. It feeds my ego and it feeds my people pleasing, which are, it's like a path back to my addiction for me. So learning to say no, it protects me in terms of it protects my sobriety. Because if I begin to feel like, oh, this person needs me and this person needs me, then I begin to go out of my way for this person, and then I begin to jeopardize the things that are important to me, which at the time was doing 90 meetings in 90 days, doing all that stuff. But yet, if you're calling me and saying, I need you now, then I would be willing to drop it and come. So I had to protect myself. So those boundaries with family were really tough, because it also meant saying no to going to birthday parties because there's a possibility of alcohol being there, or going somewhere where there could be a trigger. At that time, even going to a restaurant where there's a bar was a trigger for me. So if you're inviting me for a birthday party, I have to say no because of the environment. But I think more importantly, it was the shame I was feeling. And so I needed to push them away so that I could heal first. And them being around, it was like confronting all the things I had done at the same time and all the lies I had told at the same time. And I couldn't do that and stay sober at the same time. There's no way. So I needed to push them away so that I could deal with the things I had done and heal me first, and then I could let them back in. Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm to sort of like fast forward a little bit from that period, you've gone through this 90 days or whatever process it was, because I guess the first step for you was sobriety, right?
Yeah.
And with the Somalabl and what we're trying to do here, we sort of keep asking the question, what does mindful living look like for you?
Yeah.
So once you establish that foundation of sobriety, which I know is a constant work in progress, what did mindful living start to look like, and how did you know what path to take, or what path did you take?
So it's interesting, and I think a lot of people maybe don't put the two and two together, but being sober is the beginning of mindful living, because you now have to be conscious about everything. You have to read labels to see if there's alcohol in it. You have to ask when you go to a restaurant, is this pasta cooked with alcohol? You can't have fruitcakes, or you have to read ingredients to see what is in there before you eat it. And I think that's the natural progression I took towards like my fitness journey, because now I was being so careful about what I ate, what I drank, and not necessarily being obsessive, but being very overly cautious. Because for me, if I eat a pasta that has alcohol, at that time it could have been a trigger for a drink. So
what was it? Is it just like the taste that would draw you in?
The taste, the smell. You know how you can have a good steak and have a glass of wine? Even just having a good...
I don't know about the steak.
Sorry, my bad. You know how you can have a good tofu steak?
Yeah, tofu steak.
Yeah. And have like a glass of wine, or have a good pasta and have a glass of wine.
Yeah.
That association was very strong. So even certain foods I would stay away from just because of the association.
The connection,
yeah. And that's why I think it led to the fitness journey. I'd already lost weight in the beginning, after I had my daughter, and the doctor threatened to have another surgery. I was like, no, thank you. I'll lose weight on my own, which I did.
Hold up, wait, what?
Yeah, I know, right? So after I had my daughter, right?
Yeah.
I was severely overweight. I was about 100 kilos.
Dang.
I know, for my little
For this height? Ooh,
Yep.
yeah.
So I went for my annual checkup.
So does that mean you had a difficult pregnancy or no?
No, my pregnancy was great. I ate whatever I wanted. My pregnancy was really good.
Yeah.
I was pregnant until 41 weeks.
Dang.
Which is a very long time. But no, my pregnancy was good.
Okay.
And, I had a C-section, not because of any other reason, but because the doctors thought it would be the best thing.
That's a whole nother podcast, but
I'll be back.
yeah.
We love that you joined us for today's show. Join us again next week for another Somalabl podcast of WTF, Wellness, Tales, and Feats. See you online and see you next time. Bye-bye.